Your first step is to draw the outline of your koi fish on a piece of cardboard or even a piece of paper if that's all you have. Actually, the back of a cereal box on that soft cardboard is a really good option too. Remember, you don't want to do any of the details, you're just making the outline of the perimeter of the fish. Next, you're going to cut out that koi fish outline. If you're using a soft cardboard like a cereal box or construction paper, you can just use scissors to cut this out. If you're using a thicker cardboard, you may need to use an X-Acto knife or even a box cutter. Make sure you put a cutting mat underneath. You have adult supervision, and you want to make sure you never have your fingers in the cutting path. You got to be very careful if you're using an X-Acto knife. All right, now if you look at the koi fish at the top of the screen, this is actually a koi done by Jeremy Novy. I bought it online off of his website. Now, if you look at a stencil, the number of colors that are in the stencil is generally the number of layers that you're going to need to do. So for this layer, the fish that we just cut out, I'm only going to focus on the black shapes and lines. So I'm going to draw on those bold outlines and those organic shapes, just looking at the black. And I'm going to wait and hold off on the orange shapes for my next layer. All right, now my fourth step, again, either using an X-Acto knife very carefully or a pair of scissors, depending upon the materials that you chose. You're gonna cut out those shapes and lines. It's really important that you made the lines thick enough that they can actually be cut out. So for example, you don't wanna just do a really tiny skinny line because you're not gonna really be able to cut it out and get any paint to get through when we're using the stencil brush or the spray paint later in the project. So make sure you have thick, bold lines to cut out. All right, now once you have finished cutting out all those lines and shapes, this is actually going to be your second layer. This is going to be where you are painting in all the black. That top fish, the one that's just the outline, it's almost the negative space that's left behind. That's actually going to be your first layer of the stencil. Now we actually need a third layer for that orange. So I've outlined that fish a final time, and I'm gonna cut it out using my X-Acto knife or scissors really carefully. All right, now look at these orange spots. On this final and third layer, we're gonna draw out some more organic shapes. That's gonna be our third color. Whether it's orange, or maybe you wanna pick a different pop of color for your koi fish, that will be up to you. But once you have your shapes drawn in, you're gonna carefully cut them out. And there you have it. We've got our 3 layers to our stencils. The top is gonna be our white, the middle is gonna be our black color, and the bottom is gonna be our orange color. All right, let's start making some art. Okay, the next step is you're gonna pick what kind of surface do you wanna put your stencil on. In my case, I'm just using this blue piece of construction paper. So I lay down my first layer of the stencil, which is just the big outline, and I'm gonna use my white paint. I'm using this foam brush, but you could use a stencil brush or just a regular paintbrush if that's what you have. Or you could even do this using markers, crayons, colored pencils. Use the materials that you have available. But what's important is you hold the stencil very still with your non-dominant hand and fill in all the spaces carefully. All right, now it's really important to give that first layer a chance to dry. You can kind of wave it up and down or fan it with another piece of paper to hurry it up. And once it's dry, you'll be ready to go on to the second layer. So you are going to first put out some black paint for the second layer. I'm just using an old piece of magazine paper for a palette. It works really well, and you can just throw it away when you're done. I'm going to line up this second layer so that it lines up perfectly on top of that outline that I just made. And then I'm going to use another foam brush and dab. I like to dab straight down, kind of an up and down motion, and trying to fill in all those holes and bold lines that I cut out. Again, being very mindful and careful to hold the stencil completely still with your non-dominant hand. Okay, it's very key. If you slide that stencil around, it's going to mess up your print. So make sure that you hold the stencil very still. Okay, let's give it that black second layer of paint a little bit of chance to dry. You don't want to start the third layer if there's still wet paint on your surface, so make sure that you don't try to rush through this process. Now, once it is completely dry, you're going to give a little bit of orange paint onto your palette, and again, line up this third and final layer of your koi fish stencil, and you're going to hold it still with your non-dominant hand, get some of that orange paint, and again, an up and down motion, kind of dabbing that orange paint onto all those shapes that you cut out from the third layer of the stencil. You can give it a couple coats, make sure that you're holding it still and covering all the spaces. And there you have it, a 3-layer stencil inspired by Jeremy Novy's koi fish. Hang on to the 3 layers that you made because you can try this stencil on different surfaces and using different colors.